don't even know. It's okay. It's going. Okay, we're live. We're live. Hello. Hello. And happy holidays from Cosmopolitics. And what the hell is going on? Danny, what the hell has gone on this year?
Oh my God. It's been a long year, hasn't it?
It's
Um,
been a long ass year. And that's why we thought we would do something a little different, which is a year ender. And we're going to end the year on a bang. And if you thought the others were a rager, not in the we have rage, but we're going to rage and have a lot of fun with this one. So, what's going on down under?
Nothing good. Nothing good is going on down under. I hate to say it, but I am at the beach, so there's an upside. As you can see, I'm dressed for the hot weather. We finally have hot weather. Anyway, what we teased to our audience is less of a discussion about what Trump just said at his press conference.
And he did say alone.
And more sort of thematic. Do you
Yeah,
want to
taking a
start?
look at the year. Yeah, we thought we'd take a look at the year that was, the year that's going to be, and kind of some of the big players. I'll start with a lot of the trending, I love to look at what was trending on Google this year. And there really aren't any the only international stories are K-pop Demon Hunter, um, FIFA World Cup, and tariffs. So it just goes to show you how the world really thought about tariffs this year. That was globally. In the US, again, tariffs, new pope chosen. And one of the big stories I think of the year, and we're going to talk more about international, but was the assassination of Charlie Kirk. That was a really big story. And I think we always think that there are going to be these big issues that are going to get the country to kind of take a look at what we're becoming and what we're doing to each other. But no, all of that kind of, we need to forget about this political violence and demonizing the other certainly hasn't stopped, has it?
No, not at all. It hasn't stopped. We are, every time one of the parties calls for more comedy, more understanding, reaching across the aisle, we forget that almost instantaneously. And part of it is something that I know everybody's noticed, which is that the news cycle is now so fast.
Mm.
I bet. I bet if I challenged everybody to tell me what the big story was last week, other than Christmas,
Mm.
they'd have a really hard time. I
It's
don't
so true.
remember,
I don't either.
right?
I
I
don't
mean,
either.
if I had to ask you, what was the latest thing on Venezuela? Wouldn't people say, "Gosh, hmm, if
Yeah,
it happened, if
if it didn't happen today and something did happen day to day, every day it's like it's not just one thing, it's like five things or six things. And the incoming is just too much. And that's again why we thought we'd do this year ender. I mean, for me, the biggest stories of the year, I thought even before I looked at Google, I thought the Charlie Kirk story domestically was a big story. I thought the Gaza deal was a big deal. I really did. We can talk about that, a lot of, we're still not in phase 2. So much needs to be um, done. And here we are back to the news today. Netanyahu was at the White House today. And President Trump's really anxious to get to phase 2. And, Netanyahu's like, hey, not so fast. And now Trump's like, yeah, maybe not so fast. So, there's a lot to be said, but the killing and the world kind of focus on Gaza, and thankfully the hostages are back, dead unfortunately and alive. There's one left that has was killed even before, like on October 7th, and that they brought his body, a police officer, to Gaza. His body still hasn't been returned, but the hostages are home, and the killing in Gaza has, for the most part, stopped. I thought, President Trump pushing that deal done was a big deal, and then kind of on the larger sense, whether you like it or you hate it, Some of it I thought was, had merit. A lot of it I didn't. But I think President Trump's foreign policy was one of the big stories of the year, whether it's tariffs, whether it's, kind of more of a economic, transactional, what have you done for me lately type attitude. A lot of, again, I'm not crying for USAID. It was a corrupt and, mismanaged organization, but I think foreign aid is suffering. And just regarded of your assessment, I think, President Trump has just kind of thrown the world in a lot of turmoil in terms of how countries deal with the United States. Some countries in the Gulf are really benefiting of it, some aren't, but it is just totally different than any president, Republican or Democrat. So those are my
So,
top points.
so I think thematically, you and I talked about this yesterday, and I think it's really interesting to note that a lot of people political people in the twilight of their career, and Donald Trump is in the twilight of his career, turn to foreign policy. Let me just say, corn subsidies, what's happening with the Ford F-150, the latest redistricting crap is not that exciting. It doesn't make you look great. People are not at big parties. There's not a lot of pomp and circumstance. Foreign policy, we used to say very nastily, is very appealing to the Brie and Chardonnay crowd because there's a lot of Brie and Chardonnay. Now, Donald Trump is neither eating Brie nor drinking Chardonnay, but he really is leaning into this national security stuff. And if you look at what he talks about in his public statements, if you look at where his interests are, they are clearly in national security, whether it's on Syria or Nigeria or Venezuela or Russia or Gaza or whatever it is. He is very interested in that. Now, there are good things about unpredictability in a president. There are, whether it's Donald Trump or it's not Donald Trump, there are good things because it keeps your enemies on edge. What might he do? Nobody's sure, right? Would you ever have predicted we were going to be going after, Maduro or Nigeria, or that we would be having, a former member of Al Qaeda in the White House meeting with the president of the United States as the new president of Syria? Right. Unpredictability can be a good thing. Unfortunately, for our allies, it's not amazing because you are just not sure. And of course, the problem at the root of this is that Donald Trump doesn't have a core vision beyond his own ideas at that very moment, which may be completely distinct from his own ideas at any previous moment. It's a little bit like Joe Biden, except for the fact that Joe Biden was senile. Donald Trump is not senile. He's just incredibly capricious, incredibly self-involved. And I suspect that even though he has a circle of advisors around him who he trusts, the people you and I talk about all the time, Tom Barrack, Steve Witkoff, Susie Wiles, Marco Rubio is included in that. Nonetheless, he doesn't always listen to them. And you hear a lot of things from him that are clearly not things that are being said by those advisors. So, this unpredictability, which we see in national security, but we also see in economic policy, but we also see in domestic policy, is actually more of a liability than it is an asset. And I think I think that for me as a thematic issue, that's really what I take away from this year with Donald Trump. That there are tons of things he's done that I really like. A
But
bunch of
not a
stuff he's
lot
done that I hate.
but they're kind of it's I don't want to say that they're one-offs because some of them are connected in some way, but I think what allies and enemies, maybe it helps us with our enemies, but with our allies, they want to know, okay, what's the strategy? And there is no strategy. There's just a strategy. I want a peace deal. I want to end the war. I want to, I want tariffs. There's no there's no kind of linear way to follow or, get on that train. How can I help shape my country's interests? And that's why you see countries coming and giving him, it's like the old days when people would come like with their goats and their daughters and their gold. The only thing you could do is kind of give a gift and praise him a little bit because nothing else really seems to happen.
I think we need to. I think we need to keep. I think we need to keep track of the first mention of a goat in every one of these broadcasts because I feel like goats come up an awful lot, and
not just goats, but the goat.
Well, there's the goat too. No, well, we have no idea. But
we have no goat in foreign policy.
We have no, absolutely not. But look, I wrote a Substack this morning that about our lack of leadership, which is something that you and I talk about a ton. But further to the point that you make about a lack of strategy, I think it's not just a lack of strategy; it's a lack of guiding principles, and that's different from saying somebody is unprincipled. There are plenty of people who are unprincipled in politics, but what I see, and this is really, for me, not just Trump. This is endemic in our political system. This is the Democrats. This is the Republicans. This is our parties. And you and I would be really hard pressed to pick out somebody who we really said, no, they have a clear set of principles. They have a clear vision and they know what they're doing. And based on that, we all know what it is they're going to do next. And that's not a good thing in a country that is about to celebrate its 250th birthday. You really want a solid core there that is predictable. And I suspect that if we have the same conversation next year, a lot of the byproducts of that problem are really going to come back and bite us in the proverbial ass. We should probably move on to the biggest winner. Who do you think is the biggest winner?
I just want to say, David, our friend David Galinsky said he thought one of the biggest stories of the year was, and this is one of the good news stories that I have a little good news list. The Pope from Chicago. Yes, that was a big story. That was one of the international stories. Okay, who's your biggest winner?
This was a hard one because, a lot of our biggest winners are also biggest losers. And
no, they're not also the biggest losers. They're losers.
Look, the end of the war in Gaza, and you and I said it at the time when we talked about it, that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been Prime Minister so many times, had said, I'm not interested in a ceasefire until all the hostages are released, until there's an agreement that Hamas is no longer in power, that Hamas must be disarmed. And everybody said, dude, you are asking way too much. The price is too high. He was a huge winner this year because his demands were met, at least nominally.
And he also look at what he did in the region. And that's why when we get to the losers, I think Iran is a big loser here. Look at what he did in the region. He was, went after Iran and all of the proxies. He said, this is not just about Hamas and October 7th. We are going to make sure that nobody can go after Israel again. And we're going to change the strategic battlefield, if you will. And they went after Hamas and they went after Hezbollah and went after Iran. All their proxies are weakened. Iran is weakened. And then, we don't know exactly his involvement in getting rid of Assad, but Assad is also gone. And so I would say, I don't know if who's in Syria right now, al-Shara really helps him, but I would say he's really a big winner of the year. I agree. And I also think Putin is, a loser, but also, the big winner. He hasn't, been able to win the war, but he certainly hasn't faced the kind of pressure from the United States that we would like him to see. I also thought MBS was a big winner this year, getting an Oval Office meeting here, this big deal with the United
Mohammed bin
States.
Salman, guys. That's who Lisa's talking about.
The Saudi Crown Prince. love him or hate him or, whatever you think of him, I thought, he really ended the year with this, visit here to the White House, the equivalent of a state dinner. He's not the head of state because King Salman is still alive, but that was in all aspects a state visit. And then Argentinian President Javier Milei, you know, Trump helped get him reelected and proposed this, $20 billion bailout. I'd say he ended the year pretty high, pretty high.
We haven't talked a lot about Americans, and I think those are all fine. I don't have any real quibbles. Although I got to say, talk about second prize in a beauty contest, being a president in South America. No thanks.
Yeah.
But absolutely, Candace rightly says Qatar, big winner, and
Big
biggest
winner, yes, you're
big.
right. You're right.
Big bad guy, big winner, and we should talk about that more. But I want to name check somebody who I really, God, I never thought I would say I admire.
I know who you're going to say, but go ahead.
You know me too well, John Fetterman. Look,
Oh, okay,
here's a
that's not who
guy.
I thought.
Oh, here's a guy who gets along with the Republican senator from his state, McCormick, Senator McCormick. John Fetterman is a Democrat. I gotta say, he's a guy with principles. He's a guy who has come out this year, been willing to work across the aisle, been stalwart in his support of the things that he believes in. Maybe it was his stroke. I don't know. I have no idea, but I have turned into a big fan of that man. And no, I'm not, and I'm not kidding. I really like him. I think he's actually the way that people ought to be, minus the sweatshirt and the really horrible
you know
shorts.
what? I think the whole thing about him, and I think the sweatshirt is emblematic of it, but his policies are all, more emblematic. He just doesn't have, maybe it is the Trump. He doesn't have any fucks to give, He's like, I'm going to do what I think is right. If I don't get reelected, I don't get reelected. Maybe I'll do some good.
And Elise, even more important, he doesn't have any fucks to give, just to put it in your vernacular, which is totally accurate. And he's not rich. Remember, if you are rich, if you're a dilettante, if you're Elon Musk and you're playing in this game, you don't care. You come out, you're in, you're out, you're still rich at the end of the game.
Well, why aren't some of the more rich politicians like just saying, I don't care?
Because they suck.
Because they're the biggest losers.
Okay, biggest losers. Who's your biggest loser?
Okay, my first biggest loser, in the sense of a country who lost out this year, is Iran, and for the reasons that I said. With Israel, you know what I mean? It's kind of meticulously constructed, deterrence architecture in the region. And, General Bad Guy has really been, if not decimated, then severely degraded. I think Maduro, obviously, he's held on all these years, and, even Trump even had a bee in his bonnet for him in the first term, but now he's a loser. I think the Heritage Foundation is a big loser this year, for all fault of their own, because of their support for anti-Semites. And then I think Pete Hegseth, I guess he's winning because he's still there, but he is one of the biggest losers.
So I have a loser that is on your winners list, and that is Vladimir Putin. And I say that because I don't know whether people we tend to pay attention to what's going on in Washington and not look at this from the Kremlin's perspective, and I get that. But they have lost in this year, in killed and wounded, more than 350,000.
That makes Russia a loser, not Putin. He doesn't give a shit.
Maybe. They have gained 0.77%.
Yeah, they haven't gained a lot of land.
Of additional territory in Ukraine, at a price of almost 100 soldiers a square kilometer. That is, and your correction is probably spot on. Russia is the biggest loser this year. Iran, where there are now riots going on because of the further cratering. Further cratering of the Iranian rial, which was trading above 1.4 million rials to the dollar just yesterday, is another huge loser. I agree that so I love my friends at the Heritage Foundation. Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, is a loser par excellence for misreading his audience and having not just no principles, but the worst principles imaginable. I'm of two minds on the political front. You know, the MAGA movement, on the one hand, is something that Donald Trump has crafted, that he's really made into a political force in the country, but it's turning into a circus. And that Turning Points USA, Kevin Roberts is the president of the Heritage Foundation, guys. The Turning Points USA huge sort of conservative fest a couple weeks ago was really a circus.
Yeah.
And what it suggested to me was that absent Donald Trump, there is a nasty fight ahead for the soul of his movement, and that no one is going to come out a clear winner from that. So I think MAGA was a big loser this year, and we can blame Tucker Carlson for a lot of that. Tucker Carlson and JD Vance.
Well, I was going to say something about JD Vance, but you know why I also think they lost out this year? Because I think President Trump, you know, this movement, he said kind of recently, MAGA is what I say it is, but he did campaign on certain things, and you know, kind of this America first. And I know what you say about most MAGA not being isolationist, but you know, a strong American, you know, presence overseas. I just think there is some among some quarters, you know, with the Epstein files and everything. It's not so much about the Epstein files, Danny. It's about they kind of say, you know what, you promised us A, B, C, and D, and where are you, man? Like, I think that there is a little bit of buyer's remorse, and that's why I think there's such a circus going on here. One of the reasons. Second of all, shame on JD Vance for not, in his speech, condemning anti-Semitism and saying, you know, let's embrace our differences. I mean, they can have differences on policy and the direction of where America should go. But, you know, shame on the vice president of the United States for not saying, you know, that's why, who was it? It was Ben Shapiro, and someone else, when they went up to the podium, said, oh, this is Vivek Ramaswamy, who is batshit crazy. He gave a very principled address on some things, and he said, if you think Hitler is cool, you have no room in the Conservative Party. And you know what? I can't believe I'm saying that I agree with Vivek Ramaswamy on anything, but I did.
No. We all I totally agree with you. And Mark and I had exactly this conversation. What does it mean that we agree completely with Laura Loomer on Qatar, and we agree completely with Vivek Ramaswamy in the speech that he gave? And has, by the way, it wasn't a one-off.
There's common ground here among Americans. You know what I mean? Like, and that's why I'm just going to give a little plug for my old boss, Sam Feist, at C-SPAN. He has a new show called Ceasefire, where they bring Republican and Democratic, party, standard party members and lawmakers together to kind of talk about some of that common ground. And it shows you that, like, yeah, we think Laura Loomer is crazy, but there is, you know, some common ground on some things. So, maybe Laura Loomer's a winner. I don't know.
Well, the problem is none of these categories fit, because just as I think that the MAGA movement has really come sort of hit rocky shoals at this point, I think the Democratic Party is in absolute tailspin. The fact that
Hmm.
there was no one willing to stand up to Zohran Mamdani, so the fact that no one has been willing to condemn
President Trump.
the fact that no one has been willing to condemn his roster of anti-Semites who are part of his transition, who
Yep.
many of whom
Yeah.
appear to have been picked solely because they are anti-Semites. The fact that the Democratic Party has bowed to its worst elements, the fact that the Democratic Party is saying nothing about what Tim Walz has presided over in Minnesota, the theft of billions of dollars, potentially, of American taxpayer money intended to go for children and the needy. This is a party that has lost its way. And, just as we sort of said, MAGA is going to have a really hard time with Donald
Yeah.
Trump. Ditto for the Democratic Party. What do you stand for if you don't stand against him? Do you stand for good treatment of Jews? Do you stand against anti-Semitism? What do you stand for? I
I
couldn't
think
tell you a damn thing.
I thought what was really interesting, and I think this is another thing to watch, and I haven't quite articulated it in my head, but when I saw President Trump and Zoran Mardani, and yes, there is this, he loves a winner, he loves people who are charismatic, and he liked him. Some of the things that he was talking about like the free housing, and I kind of feel like there's going to be some strange bedfellows next year among members of MAGA and the extreme left. I think that's
Right. This
something.
is the horseshoe theory.
Yeah, I think that's something to watch next year. Okay. What we got wrong. I mean, Danny and I are never wrong, but we're going to try and
Correct. We had a very hard time with this.
Dig deep. What do you think?
So the what I got wrong is is less. Sorry, David. For me, the what I got wrong is less sort of, oh, what did I say was going to happen? What did I say? Where did I really predict this incorrectly? I certainly got the midterm wrong. I knew we were going to get shellacked in Virginia, but I hoped that in some places there was going to be a little bit of a decent showing for Republicans, and boy, was I wrong. I thought that Donald Trump would see the light on some of this tariff stuff because it is eroding support in his base. The very people who voted for him are the people who are being hurt most by these ridiculous price increases that are being driven solely by his utterly foolish and, to me, illegal tariffs. So, I was wrong about that, but I had a bigger thing that I am struggling with a lot. And this is something I argue with Mark about, and it's something that I argue with my husband about. And this is, I'm a Middle East specialist. That's my area of expertise. All the rest of this is just me blathering. And I love my countries. It's not just Israel. It's not just my Magen David. I love my friends in Syria, my friends in Lebanon, my friends in the Gulf. I love these countries. I love these people. I have really been struggling with the problem of Muslim immigration in Europe, in Australia, and in America. And for me, I ask myself again and again, am I wrong? I wrote a big piece with a friend of mine who was the head of the Open Society Foundation during the Obama administration, saying we should let in 100,000 Syrians. Should I not have said that? Was I wrong? Is this changing these countries? Look at the UK, look at France, look at Belgium, look at Australia. Oh my God.
Is it about how we treat these people once they come? Not we as Americans, but the countries. Is it about how they're treated once they get there?
Look, I don't. I think some of this is on us, in the sense that, and especially when I say us, I mean the host countries, in the sense that in the UK, less in the UK, in places like France, in a lot of Europe, countries have lost their identity. And when you don't have an identity to assimilate people to, when you don't have a culture that you're proud of, when you don't have a tradition you're willing to embrace, then it's very hard for people to move past what they left and become part of yours. But that's not the case in America. That's not the case in the UK. We're talking about a lot of second generation people whose parents are the ones who moved to the UK. In Australia, look, the guy who murdered all those people at Bondi, he right, was born here. So so the idea that somehow there's some culpability, yes, I think education is a problem. Yes, I think the failure of the melting pot is a problem. Yes, I think multiculturalism is insane. But and this has really been an unpleasant, am I wrong, kind of a question that I've asked myself over the last year, and I'm still really struggling with it because all of us, you, me, everyone we know, we have tons of Muslim friends who are absolutely great Americans, as true to the principles of the country as they could be, and yet there is this growing knot of people who are Islamists, who are propagators of the Muslim Brotherhood, and who, with the encouragement of countries like Qatar and with the quiescence of people like Zohran Mamdani and Ilhan Omar and others, are corrupting their communities, and I struggle with it a lot.
Um, that's fair. I also think that, and I've been thinking a lot about, when I when our kind of our crackdown on immigration here, at first when the president was like, we're going to go after the rapists and the killers and the murderers, I was like, okay, good riddance.
No one likes a
Um,
rapist.
no one likes a rapist or a murderer or mental, you know what I mean? They're not eating dogs, people. They're not eating cats. I think there are a lot of migrants who have come here who are, you know, not that. And I'm, I feel like maybe I haven't on that, and we disagree on this, but maybe I haven't been strong enough about how poorly I feel about what's happening. Sometimes I see these pictures and I'm like, that's just not. And it goes back to this whole thing about how, what are America's founding principles about how we treat people and the rule of law. One of the things I said this last time we met. I think I got this whole thing on anti-Semitism a little off. Like I made a pretty big, kind of line in the sand between pre October 7th anti-Semitism and post October 7th anti-Semitism. And now I realize that a lot of people that post October 7th, they didn't just all of a sudden become anti-Semitic because they saw pictures of what was going on in Gaza. To blame Jews for everything that Israel does, you had to have a predisposition towards not liking Jews in the first place. And so I think that's something um I got pretty wrong.
Yeah, depressingly, I think we
Depressing.
all we all overestimated the power of the great expression "never again," and truly believed, that the bad guys were just a small minority. And
Yeah.
gosh,
Yeah, that doesn't mean that I support, and I mean, that's why, like, I'm Jewish and I don't support a lot of the things that Israel does in the name of Jews. I
I
also
don't think
thought,
Israel does things in the name of Jews.
well, they do it in the name of the Israeli state, which is the homeland of Jewish people. So by default, he is. But what I'm saying is, if I felt that way, I would assume that other people know that Jews feel that way. But apparently, They don't. Let's talk. We have a couple minutes left. Let's talk about what the next
No,
year
I
holds.
think I thought we would go a little longer today, because it's our year-end review and because it's this pretty weird dead zone between Christmas and
Bring
New
it.
Year's. So, what did we get right?
Cocktail, I will say.
W- w- What we got right was drinking more cocktails. What we
Well,
also
no,
got
that's what
right,
we got wrong. We didn't drink enough.
we didn't drink enough cocktails.
What we got right. I what did you think that you got? Well,
Oh,
I texted Danny before and I said, what did we get right and wrong? And what did we get right and wrong?
what you and I got totally right, I think, is that phase 2 Gaza is just like, what?
Yeah.
What? That's not
Yeah.
happening. And maybe there'll be some miracle, and maybe what did monkeys will fly out of my butt, or maybe there'll be a second coming. But yeah, I don't see that happening, and I think your analysis of this and my analysis of this was spot on. This was an opportunity for both sides to move past the war, reconstitute themselves, and then go back at it October 6th style. And I think that we got that absolutely right. So there was one thing. What else did we get right? We predicted. By the way, we predicted the departure. Just to go back 1 second, we predicted the departure of certain members of the cabinet. We're about to hit December 31st, and they are all still there, right?
I think there'll be
All
one
of
or
them.
two in January. I think there'll be one or two in January. I mean, I think, one thing I struggle with as a journalist is, you know, there's being a reporter and wanting to get out the news, and then there's being an American and wanting what's best for your country. And I feel like sometimes giving currency to the things that you want to happen don't happen because it's getting so much attention and getting so much currency. And sometimes it's better if things just are done quietly. And so maybe we should just all shut up about getting rid of Hegseth, getting rid of Kash Patel, getting rid of Kristi Noem, and then maybe he'll just do it. Maybe he'll give them a Rex Tillerson style, sorry you're on the toilet, but you're fired kind of.
That was a great moment. And I supported him entirely in firing him.
I didn't support him doing it on the toilet. I think.
Come on. Yeah. Don't we all miss LBJ? All right. What did you feel like? What else did you feel like we got right?
I mean, I think we did think that Trump would vacillate back and forth on with Putin, that every time Putin comes a knocking, Trump changes his mind. Every time we think that, Trump may be getting religion when it comes to Ukraine, we always say, well, as soon as he talks to Putin, this will all be the opposite way. And I think that, I think there's optimism that there'll be a deal. I mean, but, I think we both know that Putin doesn't, on one hand, he wants the war to end, but he wants to end it on his terms. And so I don't know if he's going to hold out for some maximalist point of view. And the reason I think that Trump is beating up on Zelensky on some of these things is because he can, I mean, to Zelensky's credit, I mean, he has, maintained a kind of steely firmness in terms of what he'll accept and what he won't accept. But like Putin is just like, talk to the hand. I'm not giving you, he's not giving him anything. And so really the only thing he can do is try and beat up Zelensky, but even that's not working. So maybe it's more that I was wrong about Ukraine, but I'm also right that I know that Putin doesn't really want a peaceful settlement to this conflict. You? What say you?
About that, but I think I don't have anything new to say about it. To be fair, oh my gosh, oh my goodness me. Sorry. Looking at some of the comments and raising my eyebrows. I think that there were, look, at the end of the day, I think that
I'm just
we got a lot.
pointing in to read the comments.
No, we got a lot of the politics right, and we'll see. What does the next year hold? What's the conventional wisdom here? The conventional wisdom is there's going to be a bloodbath in the midterms. Elise, do you agree?
Nicole, I'd like to know your stance so we could benefit if you're deserving of support. I think I just want to single out that comment. I think Danny and I do this show because we have very complex, like our views are not black and white on a lot of things. On some things they are, but on a lot of things they're not. And I don't have a stance. I have principles that guide me. This is why we were talking about what are our guiding principles. And I don't think it matters what your stance is, whether you can support. I think if you watch the show, Danny and I are um I think we're good people. I think we're caring, proud Americans. And I think that we don't, Danny and I are, don't agree on everything, but we support each other 100% to feel the way we feel and still love each other, despite our disagreements on stuff. So I think, we kind of said in the last show, try and get to know different points of view. And even if you don't agree with them, try to at least understand them. Can I tell a quick story? It is a very quick story, but it's kind of funny. I told you the story of how I met the second time I met the Dalai Lama. The first time was with you, with Arthur Brooks. The second time is I would stand outside the State Department every year to wait for the Dalai Lama to give me a little blessing. And he would always, give me a little blessing after he saw the Secretary of State. And then one year he walked right by and he didn't give me my blessing. And I screamed, "Your Holiness!" in my New Jersey obnoxious way. He comes over, he gives me my blessing, and the then envoy of the Tibet envoy, Paula Dobryansky, who I ran into the other night, with my phone, I have a picture of the Dalai Lama on my phone right here. She took me to a meeting with the Dalai Lama, an audience. And when he put that prayer shawl on me, I cried. But mostly, usually an audience is like the Pope, it's for 2 minutes. But we sat and he talked to me about China and how he just came from his meeting with President Obama. And President Obama said, "Your Holiness, how do you have such a firm and reasoned understanding of what the Chinese think after everything they've done to your people?" And he said something to the effect of, if I can't engage my enemy, if I can't understand his point of view, how are we ever going to live peacefully? And I just think that that's a way, that moment was really important for me. And I always do, sometimes I can't stand people, I can't stand their point of view or whatever, but I always try to understand it. And that's my story. Sticking to it.
It's a good story, and I love the Dalai Lama as well. And he's right. Listen, you try. You're allowed to disagree, and that's the thing, But I guess the point that is critical here is that the people you disagree with aren't always bad people, right?
Yeah,
they're not they're not bad people, and they come by their views honestly. And God, I hate Meghan Markle, but the phrase "lived experience," is important. People are shaped by how they live, and they live different lives from me and from Elise, and I suspect from a lot of us. And they don't come to their views out of hatred. They come to their views because of where they sit, where they stand. And, it never hurts to know these things. It never hurts to understand these things better. And it never, Elise, your nose is right in my camera.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to look. Yeah.
And it never hurts to try a little harder to see someone else's perspective and to understand that a lot of people, come by their views fairly honestly. I'm not talking about Zohran Mamdani. I'm not talking about Tucker Carlson. I'm talking about the vast mass of us who are not, avatars of bad ideas and bad views. One of the worst things that's happened because of social media and because of the internet is that people tend to be reinforced in their views and tend not to see what other people think about things. And it's important
and
to
not
open
care.
your door. Elise, let's close out with what the
With
next year holds.
what the next year holds.
Other than a
You know,
other than a nightmare on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November.
oh, right. Yeah, it's gonna be a bloodbath, I think. Um,
It is.
um, Sudan, hell on earth. I
No one
think it's
cares.
gonna I well, but that's the problem. No one cares. But you know what? The whole Gulf is like in the middle of that. It could spread. I think we should keep an eye on it. I think that, what
No,
happens
I
is,
care. I'm just telling you that no one else cares.
well,
I agree
raise
with
your
you.
hand if you care about the poor people. It's the worst humanitarian crisis on earth. Yes, people worse than Gaza, if you can imagine. Um, what's going to happen with China next year?
So I'm going to steal directly from my colleagues and just say that um, as long as China thinks that it can get what it wants on Taiwan without war, it is going to continue. And so it will continue to push the envelope. But those who know China much better than I predict that 2026 is not going to be the year in which China acts on Taiwan. If you look at what the consequences for China have been on what it's done in Hong Kong, on what it's done to Jimmy Lai, on what it's done in the region, they have been zero. And so if you're Xi Jinping, I think you believe that you can get what you want without having to act militarily. Uh, I frankly see no reason why he shouldn't continue to think that,
Yeah,
depressingly enough.
I wonder if there's going to be some kind of trade deal with the U.S. I mean, it was interesting that during their meeting they agreed to, hold off on certain tariffs because China agreed to had this, not not block the export of rare earth minerals next year. People read on rare earth minerals. This is going to be a big thing next year. And, everyone thought that Trump won on China. I think China won on China because they said that they won't, they showed, I think, what their power was. There won't be a phase 2 on Gaza is my prediction in at least the first quarter.
But there
I
will
think
be
there'll
a
be
reconstitution. But there will be a reconstitution of Hezbollah. Iran will reconstitute its missile program. Iran will work even harder on its nuclear program. All those bad things will happen. And whoever mentioned that the Gulf would continue to interfere in Africa, the Gulf will continue to interfere in Africa because the costs are low to them. And
yeah.
that is
Well, that was me, I think.
no, no, no.
Um
Someone said it in the comments.
oh, someone else said it also. And
A
and also
brilliant member of the audience.
not um will there be a deal on Ukraine?
Look. What is the difference between now and a year ago? Now, the Ukrainians want a deal. The Ukrainians had always hoped that somehow there would be an ability to escalate against the Russians that could force the Russians into a concessions. And I think that they have decided, for a whole variety of reasons that are frankly very understandable, that they need this to stop. They need a ceasefire. And so, does that mean that there'll be an agreement? I'm not sure. Every time I think we're close,
Look, there was an
Putin,
I
you're
mean,
right about Putin. He says talk to the hand. I don't know. Um, let's say that I would give it at more than 50% odds that there will be a deal on Ukraine this year, just because I think the Europeans are also getting very, very nervous about the implications of this spiral. But, it takes two to tango.
I want to just point out, I mean, this is obviously a much bigger war than there was in Georgia, but, Putin did end the war in Georgia. Um, and arguably, I think the Georgians feel that the Russians are still there. So there could be, Putin could agree to a deal that he doesn't, fully implement and, live to fight another day. What's gonna just like let's end on Venezuela. We saw today, the just one piece of news today that the U.S. I think attacked a dock or a port or something in
Um,
Venezuela, which means that strikes on land are coming even closer. Um, you know, the first couple of months of the year could see something with Maduro. I don't think we're going to see a full out war. I don't think we're going to see boots on the ground. But I think they're going to be turning up the heat, and I think we could see a lot of news on in that hemisphere this year.
it's clearly a priority, and it should be. It should be. These are our neighbors. We want better people down south. We want to keep the Chinese out. We want to keep the Russians out. We want to keep the Iranians out. We want to keep the drugs out. We want to keep a lot out from our hemisphere, and we have had a policy of benign neglect for a very, very long time. So I am not hostile to the idea that we need to up our game. I'm not quite sure whether we're upping our game in the best fashion. I want to end with two things. I want to, first of all, I saw that some of our audiences are unhappy with what I said about immigration, and my job is not to make you happy, so that's not why I'm responding. But I want to, I'm sitting here in Victoria, the state of Victoria in Australia, and I want you to know something that I think a lot of people don't really understand. Jewish businesses throughout Australia are closing down because they're owned by Jews, not Israelis, Jews. Art galleries, restaurants. You cannot go to not just a temple, but a school, a community center without there being armed guards. They're talking about deploying the military in Sydney to protect Jews. I played this for my mom a couple days ago. The chief of police in Manchester in the UK, where there was this horrible attack earlier in the year, the chief of police in Manchester said, there's only one group of people that needs to go to school with armed guards. There's only one group of people that needs to worship with armed guards. There's only one group of people against whom all of these demonstrators are speaking out, and it's our Jews, our Jewish people. And this is not a tenable state of affairs. This is not tolerable or acceptable in a democracy. And insofar as there are communities, and believe you me, any one of you who wants to see this, let me know and I will share it. There are communities that are doing little more than bullying, terrorizing, and trying to intimidate and trying to kill or create an environment in which Jews are killed. This is the way it is. It's not like this yet in America, but it's like this here. It's like this in Europe. And we don't feel it as strongly, but let me tell you, from here, you feel it. You know it. There is a fear. What in 2025 the hell is that? And so if that requires rethinking some of the things that I have believed to the core of my being over the last 62 years, so be it. I'm going to do that because it's not acceptable. And I would like to think that I would do that for any people. One last thing, Elise, the last thing, it is our 250th birthday. And when I say that, I do not mean Elise and me and our excellent skincare that makes us look so youthful. I mean our country. It is our 250th year. And there's a lot to celebrate this year and a lot to work on and a lot we could do to make our
A
country
lot
an
we're going
even
to
better
talk
place.
about. Let's talk about what we're going to do. I'm making this up as I'm going along, but Janny and I have talked a little bit about this, and feel free to put some comments in the chat about what you'd like to see next year. We do our weekly hot takes happy hour about the week's events, but we're also happy to do, things on America's 250, and also various smaller, deeper dives on various issues. So maybe we'll send out a survey in the early part of the year about what you like to see. But we love our hot takes community. We're so glad that you come every week. There are a lot of people on today. I'm so glad.
Thank you for your
Um,
kindness and for listening and for sharing your views and for being with us and everybody have a very, very happy new year. Love you, Elise.
Love you. Happy New Year, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.